So today, we're going to unpack one of history's most chilling transformations. It's the story of how a rejected, wannabe artist claws his way out of total obscurity to become one of the most powerful and, frankly, destructive figures the world has ever seen. It's a journey that's all about personal failure, national shame, and a truly terrifying gift from manipulating the masses.
You really have to picture it. After World War I, Germany is on its knees. It's broken, it's bitter, and it's absolutely desperate for a savior. And then, this voice emerges, Adolf Hitler's voice, and it's promising exactly what everyone wants to hear: a return to greatness, simple answers, and a way out of all the chaos and despair.
But a voice like that doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? To really get how powerful it became, we have to rewind. We have to go back to the beginning, to the personal resentments that shaped his entire worldview, long before he ever got near a political stage.
His early life was just one failure after another. Getting rejected from art school twice, that wasn't just a career bump. For him, it was this deep personal wound. Then you add in his mother's death and a period where he was literally homeless in Vienna. All of that just brewed this profound bitterness inside him. As he put it himself, that time made him hard. And that hardness would define everything he did later.
For a guy who had known absolutely nothing but failure, the war gave him everything he was missing: a purpose, an identity, a sense of belonging. All of a sudden, the failed artist was a decorated war hero. He finally got the validation he'd been craving his entire life.
But then Germany lost the war, and that left him and a lot of other soldiers scrambling for an explanation. They found one in this incredibly powerful conspiracy theory, the stab-in-the-back myth. The story went that the army hadn't been beaten in battle. No way. They'd been betrayed by traitors back home, specifically, politicians, Marxists, and Jews. This one idea, this became the absolute cornerstone of his whole political ideology.
So you've got this personal bitterness, and now it's fused with this national sense of betrayal. He was totally primed for the next step. He jumps into the messy world of post-war politics, and that's where he discovers his one real and terrible talent.
His political career started almost by accident. The army actually sent him to go spy on this tiny radical group, but instead of just reporting back, he was completely captivated by their message. So he joins, and it turns out he has this electrifying talent for public speaking. He could channel a crowd's rage like nobody else, and pretty soon he takes the whole thing over.
He started looking around for inspiration, and he saw a model in Benito Mussolini, who had just seized power in Italy. So Hitler thinks, hey, I can do that. He tries to copy him with his own violent takeover, the beer hall putsch. It was a complete and utter disaster. The whole thing was crushed almost immediately, and Hitler got arrested for treason. It was a massive public humiliation.
But, and this is the crazy part, that tactical failure turned into a massive strategic victory. The trial was supposed to shut him up. It did the exact opposite. For the first time, it gave him a national stage. He basically turned the courtroom into his personal soapbox, giving these long political speeches that were reported on all across Germany.
So he gets sent to prison, and he uses the time to write it all down. He dictates his book, Mein Kampf, which is this rambling, hate-filled manifesto that lays out his entire worldview. It was literally a blueprint for everything he planned to do, detailing his obsession with race and explicitly calling for the removal of Jewish people from society.
Now, after he got out of prison, his extremist message didn't really catch on at first. Germany was starting to recover. But then, a global catastrophe created the perfect storm, giving him exactly the opportunity he'd been waiting for.
When the Great Depression hit, it absolutely wrecked Germany's economy. By 1932, 6 million people were unemployed. Just think about that number. 6 million. That's not a statistic. That's a society on the brink of collapse. That level of widespread desperation makes people willing to listen to anyone who offers them a way out.
And right into this chaos steps Hitler, offering simple, powerful promises. He didn't bother with complicated economic plans. He offered a strong leader, and he offered scapegoats. He promised to rip up that hated Versailles Treaty, fix the economy, and get people back to work. For a population this desperate, that message was incredibly intoxicating.
Once he became chancellor, he moved with terrifying speed. The Reichstag fire, the burning of Germany's parliament building, was the perfect excuse. We don't know for sure who started it, but it doesn't matter, because they used it perfectly. The very next day, a decree was signed that suspended all basic civil rights, freedom of speech, of the press, everything. German democracy was basically dismantled in a matter of days.
So, with all his political opponents either arrested or silenced, and with absolute power in his hands, the regime could now start the horrifying work of making its ideology a reality, turning hateful words into state policy. This was the moment that hate got written into the law of the land. The Nuremberg Laws were a series of decrees that made persecution official. And what's so crucial to understand is that they defined Jewish identity not by religion, which someone could, convert out of, but by ancestry. It was a biological trap with no escape. So what did these laws actually do? Well, for starters, they stripped Jewish people of their German citizenship. They made it illegal for Jews and non-Jews to get married, and they systematically pushed Jewish people out of jobs, out of schools, out of public life altogether. It was a process of total social and economic isolation. And this quote just nails it. The whole point was to turn German citizens into outsiders in their very own country, to legally redefine them as some kind of alien presence that had to be segregated and controlled.
Well, it wasn't long before laws escalated into organized violence. Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, was a nationwide state-sanctioned riot against Jewish people. Synagogues were torched, businesses were destroyed, and people were murdered in the streets. This was the terrifying leap from legal discrimination to outright terror, and it was a horrifying preview of what was to come.
And so we come to the final act. The empire that was built on aggression and hate would end up consuming itself, brought down by military arrogance and a leader who became completely detached from reality. The beginning of the end really boils down to one single catastrophic mistake: invading the Soviet Union. It opened up this massive Eastern Front that the German war machine just could not handle. It was an act of pure hubris that stretched his forces to the breaking point and ultimately sealed his fate.
And as defeat became more and more certain, did he take responsibility? Nope. He retreated into this fantasy world. He started blaming the German people, saying that they had failed him and that they weren't worthy of survival. I mean, think about that. It was the ultimate narcissistic act. He was willing to see his entire nation burn to the ground rather than admit he had failed. The final trigger for his own end actually came from Italy. News reached his bunker that his ally, Mussolini, had been executed and his body had been publicly desecrated. Hitler became obsessed with avoiding that same fate. Just 2 days later, with Russian shells raining down on Berlin, he took his own life.
Which brings us right back to that central haunting question. How does a resentful, failed artist convince an entire nation to follow him into the abyss? It's a question about the power of words, the incredible danger of desperation, and the terrifying fragility of a society when it's faced with one charismatic voice promising glory. And it's a question that history demands we never, ever stop asking.